Okay, it is now my great honor to welcome one of our own, the Deputy Commanding General of the United States Army Forces Command, Lieutenant General Laura Richardson, who will give the keynote address this morning and help us honor our national award winners. Ladies and gentlemen, General Richardson. You're welcome.
Hi, good morning. Oh, that wasn't very good. Good morning. Oh, I know you're all awake this bright early morning, and it is my honor to be one of your very first speakers for the convention and address all of the great aviation soldiers and leaders from the total Army, all three components, Army National Guard, Army Reserve, and the regular Army team. Many thanks to the Army Aviation Association of America for hosting every year such an amazing convention. It's also a privilege to engage our industry partners as well, and most important, all of our former distinguished leaders of the Army Aviation branch who have paved the way for the Army Aviation to be the premier warfighting force that it is today. Cool. Speaking of former distinguished leaders, I just wanted to share a historical photo that we found in the basement of ForceCom, tucked away in an old dusty box. One of you in the audience may have flown this awesome-looking helicopter, and I promise you I don't know who Bob is. Over the next couple of days, the Quad 8 team has a great lineup of very impactful leaders who will provide you detailed insight into the future of our Army and aviation as a whole. And of course, our Vice Chief of Staff of the Army will be speaking tomorrow, and we're very proud of him being nominated as our 40th Chief of Staff of the United States Army. I want to touch on two topics of importance to you to provide this strategic context and set the stage before I jump into my update on what ForceCom is doing. And as we know, the National Defense Strategy shifted the primary focus of U.S. national security, great power competition, away from terrorism. And we must be ready for large-scale conflict, multi-domain operations, the decisive action fight. Warfighting readiness is the foundation of the Army's ability to defeat and deter our adversaries in a security environment that has changed in order to deal with the several near-peer adversaries. This National Defense Strategy expands the competitive space so that we can compete strategically. It enables us to gain back our competitive military advantage, which allows us to build the skill sets across all domains that have been eroding over time, all while our adversaries have watched us and continued to advance. The NDS pursues comparative military advantage by expanding the competitive space through three mutually reinforcing ways. You warfighters out there are the lethal fighting force, and industry, we look to you to build those lethal, survivable, maintainable weapon systems while ensuring their affordability. Given the publication of the NDS last year, the Army issued a new, clear, and nested Army vision stating that the Army of 2028 will deploy, fight, and win decisively against any adversary in a joint, multi-domain, high-intensity conflict while simultaneously deterring others and maintaining the ability to conduct irregular warfare. On the screen is a diagram of the Army strategy from 2018 out to 2034, and it is the roadmap of when the total Army will achieve its objective defined in the vision. Our number one priority is to build the most ready and capable force possible, that we have irreversible momentum by 2022. When the priority shifts from readiness to modernization being the number one priority, then we must sustain the readiness gains we achieved. By 2028, we expect to achieve a more comfortable overmatch in lethality. And in 2034, the Army will achieve multi-domain dominance. Rest assured, Army senior leaders are absolutely aligning the balance sheets and investment programs to fund the Army's readiness and modernization priorities. Therefore, every action you take, every flight hour you fly, every repair part you put on an aircraft must equate to readiness. Army Aviation is contributing enormously to global force requirements, and as the Army's force provider, United States Army Forces Command is fully committed to providing highly trained and ready aviation units, which provide flexible options for our combatant commanders. Make no mistake, we are operating at warp speed, and we're doing everything possible to support all of these requirements. At any given time, there are 3+ cabs deployed and 3 more assigned to source PTDO or prepare to deploy operational missions. And bottom line, it takes 3 to deploy 1. For any 1 cab deployed, 1 cab just redeployed, and another cab is training to deploy next. Also, to train the ready now and fight tonight mentality, units are conducting emergency deployment readiness exercises, or EDREs, as well as real-world contingencies, response missions such as hurricane relief and southwest border missions, all of which train the critical reps and sets required to execute dynamic force employment and have our units deploying at the speed of war. To support this high demand on our aviation force, it is absolutely a total Army team effort. All compos across the National Guard, the Army Reserve, and active components. And we are consuming about 16+ cabs worth of combat power to sustain the existing requirements across the globe. This leaves the average active component bogged to dwell at about 1 to 2.3, with some units turning slightly faster to execute their next mission. The reserve component ECABs have a mobilization to dwell of about 1 to 5, with medevac and heavy lift companies operating at just under 1 to 4. When not deployed, our cabs and ECABs are conducting intense home station training and supporting our BCTs in their decisive action crucible training event at the National Training Center or the Joint Readiness Training Center, while simultaneously sourcing and filling no less than 3 PTDO missions, focused ready rotations, and other requirements in support of COCOMs and Homeland Defense. If anyone says we have extra additional aviation assets just sitting around, they are absolutely misinformed. There is no excess capacity. So to provide you some insight into how FORSCOM is squaring the circle on continuing to conduct COIN operations and train to be ready for the high-end full-spectrum fight. We know we need to be ready for large-scale ground conflict, multi-domain operations, and it requires a shift from executing the smaller decentralized COIN to becoming a larger collective, lethal, aggressive, and dominating maneuver element in support of the ground force. We must be able to deliver precision attacks and mass combat power quickly, be proficient at brigade-level air assaults, conduct outstanding maintenance while sustaining ourselves, and all in an austere environment, contested against a near-peer adversary. FORSCOM uses corps and division commanders and DCG-level leadership and oversight of our cabs, coaching, teaching, and mentoring our aviation leaders and junior leaders through maintenance terrain walks, monthly FORSCOM aviation readiness reviews, and attending AMCOM 101. Since beginning the monthly aviation readiness reviews about 3 years ago, the aviation operational readiness rates in FORSCOM has increased about 15% in the aggregate. And our ground leaders are now well-versed in aviation as a battlefield enabler and a multiplier, and also in the generation of aviation readiness. The Army Aviation Training Strategy is the foundation for our collective level proficiency and the governing document for developing aviation training plans. The focus is collective proficiency, not currency. And for damn sure, it's not hours per crew per month, which is the bean counter view of things. And what's really important, and just like the ground training strategy, the aviation training strategy requires 100% funding annually to meet readiness requirements and provide trained and ready forces. We must ensure that every planned flying hour and training dollar spent directly builds readiness at the individual, team, company, and battalion level. Individual and crew reps and sets build the foundation for the high-end collective proficiency that's required. FORCECOM Commander's guidance is for aviation units to train your training strategy and do not meter your training based on perceived resource shortages. We tell our Corps and Division and CAB commanders, you train and spend and let FORCECOM worry about the money. The day-to-day challenges across FORCECOM include balancing up tempo while training and preparing for decisive action in multi-domain operations. We acknowledge this across the force and throughout the enterprise. Time and personnel shortages continue to be the limiting factors for our CABs and remain a big challenge. The Chief of Staff of the Army approved new manning guidance this past December, requiring CABs to be filled at 100%. And this will take a little time for the personnel system to catch up so that we can grow these aviation MOSs. However, as I mentioned earlier, Army senior leaders are balancing the sheets and have mandated changes to align resources and increase the throughput of the Army's pilot training programs and other areas throughout the aviation enterprise. Regarding fleet readiness, leaders must be engaged in establishing a culture of sustaining equipment. This is commander's business. We are doing fairly well in our operational readiness rates, and in the last reporting period, with all 3 aircraft MDSs meeting or exceeding the DA operational readiness objectives of 75% or better. This is a good achievement, and it took 3 years to get here, but given the continued op-tempo, leaders must keep a laser focus on fleet readiness at all times, and we must continue to improve. FORCECOM's policy is that operations cannot outrun maintenance, and if it does, the unit needs to stop and get its maintenance back on track to where it's supposed to be before continuing operations. It's so important and part of the basic fundamentals for commanders to train their units so maintenance capabilities enable operations, not bring them to their knees. And a strong maintenance culture doesn't just happen. It absolutely requires leader involvement at echelon. I want to touch on aircraft transfers for a minute because under the radar, our CABs are doing phenomenal work in transferring hundreds of aircraft across the enterprise at 1020 standards annually. It's considered a reputational event. And for now, these transfers will continue in order to meet modernization requirements and combatant commander demands. For example, over the last 3 fiscal years, FORCECOM averaged 350 aircraft transfers per year. And in FY19, we project 216. That said, modernization requires a continuous, deliberate effort and is absolutely integral to fighting and defeating a near-peer threat. Therefore, we must balance training at the individual crew and collective levels with building dwell and meeting COCOM commander requirements as we continue to modernize our aviation fleet across all 3 compos. In laying out some of the day-to-day challenges in FORCECOM, I want to highlight what we're doing to mitigate the concerns and place a heavy focus on the aviation enterprise across the organization and industry. The aviation training strategy as I mentioned previously, is the roadmap to aviation warfighting proficiency. And you'll find that the following themes throughout FORSCOM guidance initiatives to include the command training guidance, the FORSCOM maintenance terrain walk program, and FORSCOM aviation maintenance training directive, which state the following. Fly the training strategy, don't fly the budget. Train what you can sustain. Leaders must be involved in maintenance management. Maintenance is training, training is maintenance. To get after this explicit guidance in executing aviation training strategies, our units are taking advantage of the crucible experience at the combat training centers to maximize collective level training and required extra reps and sets. An aviation unit must have mastery of the blocking and tackling fundamentals of maintenance before they get to NTC or JRTC, or it will paralyze them and make them combat ineffective. Units that don't have strong maintenance systems and processes or lack leader involvement in those processes have a really hard time keeping up with the op tempo and the multiple dilemmas that the enemy presents in multi-domain operations. Among several other initiatives to drive and oversee aviation readiness, I mentioned earlier, FORSCOM established the monthly Aviation Readiness Review in 2016. The MAR has been a critical enabler of the entire aviation enterprise to include Corps and Division commanders and DCGs, CAB leadership, Headquarters Department of the Army G3 Aviation, AMC and AMCOM, PEO Aviation, CCOM, and the Aviation Center of Excellence. The FORSCOM DCG chairs it, and the entire FORSCOM staff attends. It's a roll-up-your-sleeves, elbow-grease meeting that works the hard issues in the aviation enterprise. And it also is a forum where commanders and units can discuss in detail each of their readiness levels of training, P, S, R, and T ratings, so that the enterprise can work to resolve these issues as quickly as possible to enable readiness. The integrated venue has greatly increased leader and enterprise involvement and engagement. However, NMCM rates tend to be the greatest readiness inhibitor, behind some of the NMCS long lead part challenges. But leader involvement and education is always needed to correct the high NMCM time. We also need the support and effort, as always, from the industrial base and our industry partners. That said, I want to spend my last few minutes talking about the aviation industrial base and its critical impact on readiness. I represent the clear, unvarnished warfighter perspective, and I consider it an important duty to do so. Building readiness is an absolute total team effort from the industrial base all the way to the flight line. I previously mentioned modernization and lateral transfers must continue in order to meet operational and COCOM requirements, as well as maintain readiness rates. In that, across the spectrum of modernization, supply, maintenance, and safety, industry must ensure the quality assurance of components. Quality assurance and quality control is a no-fail mission. Quality escape and unreliable parts results in an increase in the potential for component failure. Lack of proper quality control creates additional inspections and unforecasted maintenance burdens on already overtasked aviation soldiers, which increases the risk to force and mission. I see too often now strategic decisions resulting in pushing the risk down to the maintainer level, and too much is being done on the backs of our soldiers, and that needs to stop. When it comes to the remanufacturing line and fieldings, it's really unacceptable that a unit in receipt of new equipment, fielding, discovers multiple shortages when they attempt to start their new equipment training. There are many examples I could provide, but the bottom line is that the risk is pushed down to the soldier and unit level to discover and then try to figure out ways to work around the deficiencies in order to ensure they're trained and ready for the next fight. To date, we've had 2 major delays in the AH-64 Echo remanufacturing line. We do understand the complexity and time it takes to build a new AH-64 Echo Apache. However, continuous delays in the fielding directly impact readiness. And these two delays put the Enterprise in a proverbial tailspin, which crash-landed on the backs of our soldiers and our units. These delays drove more aircraft transfers, and we had to cross-level aircraft between units in order to ensure those preparing to deploy in harm's way had enough aircraft to train. Additionally, replacing strap packs alone required our FORCECOM soldiers to invest an extra 6,672 man-hours to inspect and retrofit the strap packs with fail-safe collars. Training schedules were disrupted and readiness suffered. Next, getting our UAS and ASC programs right today is critical to ensure we are prepared for the fight in the large-scale ground combat operations against the near-peer adversary. However, in both Gray Eagle and Shadow systems, we have incurred component failures over the last several years. Another area to emphasize is on supply and maintenance, specifically the impact of long lead time parts on readiness. Long lead time parts are high on the AMCOM Commanding General's list, and AMCOM has identified the 10 parts per MDS as critical readiness drivers. The aviation industry, along with the Defense Logistics Agency and PEO Aviation's program managers, must accurately forecast, pursue, and project health on all components and hardware associated with the readiness and safety of the fleets. Bottom line is that we need strategic depth at wholesale and ASL depth at the tactical level. And industry partners, you were key in helping AMCOM achieve this strategic depth of quality parts and expeditiary delivery times. Before I close this morning, I also want to talk about safety. As we know, safety is everybody's job, commanders, soldiers, and industry. Over the last 9 years, there have been over 997 aviation safety messages published. All of these distractors can be contributed to quality escape and unreliable parts, and result in taking time away from training and building a lethal, ready aviation force. And time is our most precious and limited resource. Remember, quality builds confidence and trust, and in turn will advance our future readiness. The impact industry has on readiness is enormous. Industry challenges must not burden our soldiers. Their focus is on training, building and sustaining readiness, and deploying and winning in combat. If you can go home each night and be able to say to yourself, I did everything I could today to support the warfighter, then we will have a great chance of beating our adversaries in large-scale ground combat operations in the future. In closing, I want to say again what an honor it is to address this audience. To our soldiers, I know you accomplish Herculean tasks daily and move our premier warfighting force forward. And I'm very proud of you and proud to serve with you. Leaders, keep training your units to build the most ready and lethal maneuver force on this earth. Be proficient at the collective level in large-scale ground combat operations, and challenge yourselves and your soldiers at home station with multiple dilemmas in austere environments. As I stand up here, I'm confidently looking upon the future of Army and Army aviation. All of you here today have an integral role in preparing the Army of 2028 and 2034, and driving the Army towards achieving its vision to deploy, fight, and win decisively against any adversary in a joint, multi-domain, high-intensity conflict, and continuing to be the finest world's dominant land force. We remain freedom's guardian. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Yeah, please. I've asked Laura to stay here for just a minute before, because I'm going to ask her to help us with the awards. But I got to tell you just a little bit. Some of you may know, some of you may not. Laura Richardson, General Richardson, was actually the acting FORSCOM commander as well as being the deputy FORSCOM commander for a period of a couple of months. She weathered through that, and now, of course, the Army has seen fit that they've nominated her to go to our North next, which was announced at AUSA. And so between trying to do her day job, work with Congress, and get ready for her next job, she managed to fit us in. And I got to tell you, I cannot be prouder of what she and her husband have both accomplished, but amazing, and God bless.